Let's learn how to knit at the Mustang Public Library.
So in your knitting kit, you'll receive different size needles. You can find the size needles on the needles themselves. You'll also receive darning, or you'll get in your kit darning needles that you'll need to weave in the ends, and some scissors. What will not come in your kit is the actual yarn. You can go to any crafting store, Walmart, any store, purchase yarn. If you look at the back of the yarn, it'll tell you what size needle you want to use for knitting. This is a size 11, so you can see what kind of knitting yarn you would want to use with the kit that you'll receive at the library. So when you're buying yarn and you're using more than one ball for your project, make sure you look at the lot number and make sure your lot numbers match. Sometimes the coloring of the yarn can be slightly different between lot numbers. When you begin knitting, I suggest starting with a thicker single strand yarn. It doesn't have to be this type of yarn, but anything that's a little bit thicker. If you go with a yarn like this that has two different colors, sometimes it's easy to split the stitch like this, and then you end up with not a full stitch, or it kind of messes up your project a little bit. So I highly recommend a thicker yarn to start knitting with. The first thing we're going to do is learn how to cast onto the knitting needle. And the first thing we need to do is make our first stitch. So how you can do that is you can cross this over. The tail here, you're gonna bring it up to make your first knot. And then you will slip it on to your knitting needle and pull the tail to tighten. And there you've made your first stitch. So there are two stitches in knitting. There's the knit and the purl, and now I'm going to show you how to do the knit stitch. So this is still casting on. We're going to cast on 10 stitches. We already have one, so we need 9 more. So you're going to take your right needle and you're going to slip it underneath the first needle, and you'll have yarn on both sides. Make sure you do not grab the tail, and you're going to grab this and you're going to wrap it counterclockwise, and then you're going to pull it back through the stitch, and then you're going to come back around here and slip it back on to the other needle. You want to make sure your stitches are loose so you can get them from needle to needle. So now we've casted on 2. So again, you're going to go under, going to wrap this around counterclockwise. You're going to pull it through. And then you're going to twist this around, and now you've casted on 3. And you can leave the needle in here if it's easier. So I left it in here. You're just slipping it under the yarn in counterclockwise. Slip it through, twist, and now we have 4 stitches. You can see 4 here. Again, we're going to slip this through counterclockwise, pull it through, and twist it on. And so now we've casted on 10 stitches here onto your left needle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we have 9 stitches. So we have 10 stitches here that we've casted onto our left needle. And this will be the width of your project. So if you want it to be wider, like if you're making a scarf, you know, you might want to do 25 stitches. This is just 10 to show you how to knit. and then the length is however many rows you end up knitting or purling. So next we will learn how to do the knit stitch. So now we're going to knit our first stitch. You'll always have this on your left side are the stitches that have not been worked with yet. So you're going to go from left to right. So to knit, you're going to take your right needle, you're going to slip it through just like you did casting on. You're going to wrap this around counterclockwise, pull it through and slide it off of your left needle. So you're going to go through the stitch, wrap it around, pull it through and pull it off. Okay, so again, you're just going to go underneath your left needle through the yarn, counterclockwise, pull it through, slide it off. And this is the knit stitch. Just make sure you're keeping your stitches loose so they easily slide on and off of the needles. So now we are at the end of your first knitted row, and you see here that everything is now on your right needle. So all of our stitches are on our right needle now after finishing the first row. And so to start the second row, you just need to twist your needle around, and then you're on the left needle. Your left needle now becomes your right needle. So at this point, make sure you are not knitting with the tail. You don't want to knit with the tail. So just make sure that the one that you grab is attached to your ball of yarn. And so we just make sure your yarn is hanging down. Make sure you have the right yarn. And so we're just going to start the process again. So you'll go under your left needle, make sure you've got the right yarn, spin around, pull it through. It's the exact same process. And you'll slide your stitches to the end of the points as you're knitting along, and just kind of let that tail hang down. Just make sure you don't pick it up to knit with it. And this is how you knit. So again, you're going under the left needle, around the stitch, through the stitch, counterclockwise, pull it through and push it off. Now I am holding my yarn with my right hand. You can hold it with your left as well. You can look up it's however you're comfortable holding the yarn. If you do it with your left hand, you can knit a little bit faster, but this just always felt more comfortable for me to use my right hand. Okay, 2 more stitches. Through, around, back through and off. Now your end stitch can be a little difficult because it's the last stitch. So there, here, back around, and you've knitted another 10, and you just spin it around to start the 3rd row. So now we're going to learn the purl stitch. There's only 2 stitches like I mentioned before. There's the knit and the purl. A purl stitch is basically just a knit stitch backwards. So for the purl stitch, again, you have everything on your left side. You have your right needle. You're going to go into the front. And you kind of have to hold the needle there. You're going to go counterclockwise, and you're going to pull it back through the other stitch, and we're going to slide it off. So again, a purl stitch, you're going to slide it through the front from right to left. You're going to do counterclockwise. You're going to pull it back through, and you're going to slide it off. Front, right to left, counterclockwise, pull it through, and slide it off. And so again, you're just going to turn it around and start the next row, making sure you're not going to use the tail. So when you get to the end of your project, and depending on how many rows you have will determine the length of your project. But when you get to the end of that, you'll have to do what's called binding off, and that basically just it's just a way to get your stitches off of your needles. So it starts out just like a knit stitch. You're gonna do one knit. So this actually creates an additional row. You're gonna do a knit, and you're gonna have one over on your right needle. And then you're gonna do one more. So now you have two. And then over here on your right needle, you're gonna take this, and this might be really kind of difficult with this yarn, and you gotta pull it over the other. So knit, and then you're gonna pull this one over. It's a little difficult with this yarn here. And this is what's called binding off. And as you can see, you're binding off over here. So this is the last one. You don't have anything on here, and you're just going to do the same process here, like that. And then you'll take your scissors, and whenever you cut off, you want to make sure you have a tail, because we'll weave in the ends. And then you just pull this out for the last one. You need to pull this through to make a knot. Just like that, and then I will show you how to weave in the ends later. So after you've binded off your project, you will have these tails left, and you want to weave these into your project so that way it stays intact. So the easiest way to do this, you're going to use a darning needle. For thicker yarn, you want to get the biggest needle you can find, and you're going to thread it through. So once your needle is threaded with the tail of the yarn, you're just going to come in here and you're just going to kind of weave it. And it doesn't have to be perfect. I would suggest, if you're using multicolored yarn, that you use the same color yarn to weave it through. But you just kind of pull it through. And this is going to secure all of it. And so you just keep kind of weaving it through. I like to do it along the top or the edge, whichever end you're using. And I don't know how far you should go with this. You just want to make sure. This is a pretty tight stitch, so you probably don't need to weave all of it in, but you just want to make sure you have enough so your project stays secure. And then when you feel like you've had, several inches here, you'll cut it off, and you're done. This is a finished project that I have here. It's a hand towel, and you can see the different patterns within here. And this is all using knit and purl stitch. So if you look at the pattern here, you can see that the first 2 rows you'll knit. Then row 3, it's just knit and purl, and different, each row is a different numbers of what you will knit or purl in each row to make the patterns.
I'm Keaton, and my Girl Scout Gold Award is Art for All, and I partnered with the Mustang Public Library to bring art to the public.